Alright guys, I am back with another deck profile for Cardfight Vanguard Dear Days 2 on Nintendo Switch. This time we got version 1 of my standard format Keter Sanctuary Gramgrace Sieg deck. So this is my second different Gramgrace build. This one is focused on his new form, Gramgrace Sieg, which was originally introduced in this game before even being introduced in the physical card game. Since this version 1 of the deck does include everything through the first additional card pass, so that's up through DZ Booster 5. In the physical card game, Gramgrace Sieg himself was actually in DZ Booster 6, but it was included in this game as just part of the promo pack. So you can get this boss unit without having to buy that second card pass. But anyway, this deck is very similar to my other Gramgrace build. I already have a deck profile up on it if you want to check it out. This one is pretty much the same strategy. It's still focusing on, powering up your whole board with your Persona Ride and attacking with your back row center unit, same as the OG Gramgrace. It really just has a lot of marginal improvements here and there that sort of add up to really give the deck a big boost overall. But there's nothing real flashy or amazing about what this deck does compared to the original version. It just sort of outpaces the original with a bunch of tiny little improvements, all adding up to a big difference. So anyway, as always, we'll be going through the deck, and then we'll show it off in one card fight for you to see it in action. So starting first with the Ride deck, I am using the same scrapped together Ride deck that I had for my OG Gramgrace build. So for our Grade 0 starter, we have Vanguard Brave. So when he's rode upon, if you win second, draw a card, standard D-Series starter skill. And of course, once again, just like with OG Gramgrace, you do prefer to go first with this deck. Actually more so than the other build, since one of your main skills is no longer locked behind your opponent being Grade 3 anymore. So this one definitely prefers to go first, getting you that Persona Ride as soon as possible, without really hindering your strategy much at all. So next up for the Grade 1, we have Little Sage Marin. So its auto ability, when this unit is rode upon by a Grade 2 with Blaster and its card name, look at the top 7 cards of your deck, choose up to one Grade 2 with Blaster and its card name from among them, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle your deck. If you did not reveal a card, choose a Vanguard Brave from your soul, and you may call it to a rearguard circle. And then again, he has his continuous ability that says during your turn, if you have 3 or more units, this unit gets power plus 2,000. So he never ends up on rearguard circle really, so that second skill wasn't used for anything. The first skill will always let you superior call Vanguard Brave out of your soul, since we're not running any Grade 2 blasters in the main deck. You will always fail to find any, because there's none there. So this is just a superior call out to your starter from your soul, which is then just going to be fodder for the cost of your Grade 2 ride. So that's pretty much his whole purpose. Next, for the Grade 2, we of course have Blaster Dark. So his auto ability, when this unit is placed on Vanguard or Rearguard Circle, you can counterblast one and retire another rearguard. To choose one of your opponent's rearguards, retire it, and this unit gets drive +1 until end of turn. And then again, his continuous ability that says during your turn, when he's on rearguard circle, if your rearguard was retired this turn, this unit gets power plus 5,000. So again, he never ends up on rearguard circle, so that second skill is not used either, just like Marin's. The first skill lets you counterblast one and retire the Vanguard Brave that you called out of your soul off of Marin's skill, in order to wipe out one of your opponent's rearguards and also give Blaster Dark an extra drive. So you can get Twin Drive on turn 2, while also taking out one of your opponent's cards for effectively the cost of one Counterblast and one Soul Blast. So fairly good ability. It is a +1 to you and a -1 to your opponent. So not bad overall. And then lastly, for the Grade 3, we of course have Sword Saint Knight Dragon Emperor Gramgrace Sieg. So this is Gramgrace's new and improved form. So first off, he has his continuous ability that says your Persona Ride also increases the power of your back row units. So the exact same continuous ability that OG Gramgrace had, letting you power up your entire board with your Persona Ride, letting you hit some pretty massive numbers on those turns. And then he has his Activate ability that says once per turn you can Soul Blast 1 to choose one of your back row center rear guards, and it gets a new continuous ability until end of turn that says this unit can attack from the back row, and it gets power plus 10,000. And then if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you can Energy Blast 3, and that unit and this unit get critical plus 1 until end of turn. So this ability is very similar to the activate ability of OG Gramgrace, though there is some key differences. The most major of which is that it no longer costs a counterblast, but it is also no longer a plus 1, since you don't get to draw off of it like you could with OG Gramgrace's ability. So a lower cost, but also doesn't generate any card advantage for you. Also, instead of having you superior call a card from your hand to the back row center rearguard circle, this just targets a unit that's already there that you can just normal call from your hand or superior call before using this ability or whatever you want to do. So you have to have a unit already in place behind your Vanguard in order to target with this skill. But that's actually a good thing since it frees up the way in which you can call that unit, and we do have a unit in this deck now that can revive itself from drop. So this ability is more versatile in that regard, but it does give the same ability that OG Gramgrace gave to that unit, giving it an extra 10k and the ability to attack from the back row, so you can get that 4th attack in every turn. And of course we do have the second part of this ability, which is a new bonus with the Energy Blast 3 cost, letting you give both Gramgrace Sieg and your back row center rearguard an extra critical until the end of the turn. So that gives you crit pressure on 2 of your attacks. Now it does require your opponent's Vanguard to be at least grade 3, so if you do go first you won't be able to use this skill on turn 3, but from turn 4 onwards you can use it, and of course if you go second you can use it turn 3 as well. So getting that extra pressure on 2 of your attacks is very nice. Plus we still have a way to give this card triple drive on top of that. So you definitely got some more pressure on at least 2 of your attacks that turn. So yeah, very similar to the OG's skill, but again, some marginal improvements here and there. Which is also pretty much the story for his final auto ability that says at the end of the battle, your back row rearguard attacked. You put that unit into your soul, and if you put a card into soul, you draw a card at the end of that turn. So again, very similar to the OG Gramgrace's ability, letting you put that back row center rearguard into soul to clear out that circle after they attack. However, the big difference between the OGs and this ability is that you don't get the draw off of it until the end phase, as opposed to getting it immediately, which OG Gramgrace did. So that actually helps you with one specific combo in this deck, that we do have a grade 2 card that can potentially let you set up a trigger on the top of your deck for you to drive check into. So delaying that extra draw until the end phase can allow you to potentially stack that trigger on the top of your deck and still be able to drive check into it without drawing into it with Gramgrace's ability, which was an issue with the OG Gramgrace build that I just did. If you try to do that combo with Biscotti or Bradyarch or whatever, you could potentially draw into the thing you were trying to stack on your deck instead of drive checking into it. But you can avoid that here with this ability with a different timing without having to sacrifice any card advantage, since you still do get the draw out of it at the end of the turn. So once again, just a marginal improvement, but helps in one very specific scenario. So overall, very, very similar to the original boss form, but the extra crit pressure and the marginal changes in timing and such does help improve the overall flow of the deck. So that is the ride deck. Moving on to the main deck. First off, for the grade 3s, we of course have our 3 additional copies of Gramgrace Sieg for that very, very important Persona ride. And unfortunately, we don't have any fancy version. We just have the standard promo version. Once we get the second additional card pass, then you can get a double frame rear. But for right now, I just have this. So next up for the grade 3s, we have 4 copies of Soaring / Knight Esmerie. So she has 2 abilities, first of which is an Activate ability that's active when she's in your drop zone. That says if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Gramgrace in its card name, you can Energy Blast 3 and call this card to rearguard circle. So a very nice ability, just an Energy Blast 3 for a +1, letting you revive her from the drop. And then she has her second ability, which is her auto skill, that says when this unit attacks a Vanguard, you choose one of your grade 3 or greater Vanguards with Gramgrace in its card name, and it gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. And if this unit is attacking from the back row center rearguard circle, then you can counterblast 1, and it gets power plus 5,000, drive plus 1, instead of just power plus 5,000. So this card is the replacement for Fernbale in this deck, since it does his job but better, pretty much, especially when comboed specifically with Gramgrace Sieg. Since this card is a counterblast cost, but it is also a +1, since you no longer have the discard cost tied to getting that extra drive like you did with Fernbale's ability. Also, this ability is not locked to your opponent being grade 3 or greater, so that means that you can use this skill on turn 3 going first, which you could also not do with Fernbale. So the fact that this card has a counterblast sort of makes up for the fact that Gramgrace Sieg does not have that counterblast cost anymore. So it's basically just taking the counterblast 1 for a +1 off of Sieg and putting it onto this card instead. But it is still an improvement overall, since you get that extra drive out of it, and you can potentially do it quicker since it no longer has that grade 3 restriction. Now, it does give a little less power than Fernbale did, since Fernbale gives your Vanguard an extra 10k in drive. This one only gives 5k, but it can give the 5k even without paying the cost. So if you don't have anything to counterblast, you can just gain the 5k on its own without the drive. So you're giving up a little power, but it potentially speeds up the deck. Very important to let you get that triple drive every turn, which this card is your primary call target to your back row center rearguard circle. However, if you do plop her in the front row, she still can be useful, since you still can give that 5k to your Vanguard if she's sitting in your front row as well. So she can potentially fill in a spot in your front row if you need to just fill up that board. But you do want to prioritize getting her into the back row center, which there's no way to search this card in this deck, so you do have to just blind draw into it. But if you can manage to see 2 copies of this card, you actually can loop them using her first ability, and be able to get her back onto your board every turn. All you have to do is have 1 in your drop and then 1 on your board. So you use her skill when you attack with her, and then use Gramgrace's ability to shove her into your soul. Then on your next turn, you can revive the second copy from your drop to back row center with her activate ability. And then when you use Gramgrace Sieg's ability to give her the ability to attack, you can just soul blast out the first copy that you shoved into your soul the previous turn to set it back up into drop. So you can just loop the 2 of them between your drop, rearguard circle, and soul over and over again, and you're pretty much set up for the rest of the game. So it is relying on blind luck in order to be able to set up that combo, but if you can see those 2 copies and loop them like that, you're pretty much good to go. So a very, very important card for this deck, definitely the key rearguard. This is also the only card in this deck that is from the first additional card pass, since it's one of the promo cards that were looped in with DZ Booster 4. But a very, very vital card for the deck overall. So next up, we got 2 copies of Spinning Knight Gwendolyn. So she has her continuous ability that says during the battle this unit attacked, if you Persona Road this turn, this unit gets power plus 5,000, and when your opponent would call cards from their hand to Guardian Circle, they must call 2 or more at the same time. So again, just a nice offensive unit. She does require you to Persona Ride that turn, so it's a turn 4 skill at the soonest, but it gives her an extra 5k and guard restrict, forcing your opponent to call 2 or more cards every time they guard. So on a Persona Ride turn with a booster behind her, she's hitting some massive numbers. So just putting that little extra pressure on that row with that guard restrict is always nice. If you don't have Esmeree for some reason and you have to call her to the back row center, it can work off of there too, but most of the time you should be able to have the Esmeree loop going. But yeah, overall just still a helpful offensive unit in this deck. So then lastly for the grade 3s, we just have 1 copy of our normal order Regulus piece, Gradius Greydall. So it is a Regulus piece, so you can only have one of it in your deck and use it one time in a fight. And again, I think I'm pronouncing that right. I know I pronounced it Regales piece in the Dear Days 1 videos I made, but I think it's supposed to be Regulus piece. But anyway, you can play it with no cost, and you can play it if you have a Grade 3 Vanguard with Persona Ride and you did not ride this turn, and it just lets you activate Persona Ride. So just a backup way in order to get that Persona Ride off. Obviously you want to get that as consistently as possible to get the huge power gain to your entire board. So if you don't have another copy, just a normal Persona Ride into, then you can use this as a backup. Not quite as good as a regular Persona Ride since you are missing out on the soul gain from it, but a good backup nonetheless. So this is the Regulus piece that I still prefer for this deck. So that's all the Grade 3s. Moving on to the Grade 2s. First off, we got 3 copies of Knight of Soaring Spear, Gwyn Law. So his auto ability, when this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, if you have a Vanguard with Gramgrace in its card name, you soul charge 1, and this unit gets power plus 5,000 until end of turn. So a very simple ability, just giving himself 5k and giving you that extra soul resource. Soul rarely becomes an issue in this deck. It can sometimes, mostly if you use Spiral Cutie too much early game. But other than that, soul isn't too bad since, you know, Sieg is sort of paying for his own cost. So it's not the biggest issue in the world, but it's still helpful to have something to gain that extra soul back. Because if you do run out of cards in your soul, then your Vanguard is pretty much vanilla at that point. So yeah, a very helpful skill in the deck. So next up, we got 3 copies of Knight of Soaring Refinement, Defend. So he has 2 auto abilities. First one says when your Grade 3 or greater unit in the center column attacks, if you have a Vanguard with Gramgrace in its card name, that attacking unit gets power plus 5,000 until the end of that battle. And then he also has a second auto ability when he's on a front or rear guard circle. That says when this unit attacks, if you have a Vanguard with Gramgrace in its card name, and your units in the center column attack 2 or more times this turn, you can counterblast 1, and this unit gets power plus 15,000 until end of that battle. So this card is used mostly for his first ability, more so than his second one. The first ability gives you some passive power gain to 2 of your attacks that turn, boosting your back row center attacker and your Gramgrace by 5k, which again most of the time should be Esmerie and Gramgrace. So giving just some free power to both of them is very nice. The second ability can be used every now and then, but it's a counterblast 1 just to gain some power. So usually you want to save those counterblasts for some of your other skills that actually generate some card advantage for you. You can potentially use it if you're going for your kill turn or whatever, but a lot of the times I just have him for that passive power gain from his first skill. So next up, we got 4 copies of Spiral Cutie Angel. So she has 2 auto abilities. First one says when this card is discarded from hand during your ride phase, you can Soul Blast 1 and put this unit on the bottom of the deck and draw a card. So just a nice early game skill. If you discard her to ride, then you can Soul Blast 1 and send her to the bottom to draw to replace herself. So you essentially get a free ride out of it, except for the Soul Blast cost, which you have to be careful about using this ability in those first early turns, since if you use this on turn 1, you'll have to Soul Blast out Wingal Brave, which will stop Marin from being able to do anything. So you generally don't want to discard her on turn 1. On turn 2 or 3, you can use her, but you don't want to use her too much, because you can potentially run out of soul and not be able to pay Gramgrace Sieg's cost during your main phase of turn 3. So be mindful of that. If you have a copy of Gwyn Law in your hand, then you can just call him and get that soul back. So if you have him, you don't have to worry about it too much. But if you don't have Gwyn Law handy at the moment, do be careful about overusing this skill, because you don't want to deplete that soul resource and screw yourself out of being able to use your main skill every turn. So then she also has her second auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if you Persona Road this turn, you can counterblast 1 to look at the top 2 cards of your deck, choose a card from among them, put it into your hand, and put the rest on the top or bottom of the deck. So this is a pretty nice ability in this deck. Again, it is requiring you to Persona Ride that turn, so the turn 4 play at the soonest. But it's a Counterblast one for a +1, since you get to look at the top 2 and put 1 into your hand. So it's better than just a blind draw, since you get to choose out of 2 cards which one you want in your hand. And then the other one that you didn't grab, you can either put on the top or the bottom of the deck. So if it's something that you don't want, you can just send it to the bottom to get it out of the way. Or if it's something like a trigger or something, you can stack it on the top of your deck. And like I mentioned earlier, since the timing has changed for the draw off of Gramgrace Sieg's auto ability, you can stack that trigger on the top with this skill and not worry about drawing into it before doing your drive checks. So this can potentially allow you to set up a trigger for your Vanguard to check into, which is especially nice, especially if you get lucky and find like your over trigger in that top 2 or something. So a very helpful skill in this deck, helping you generate some more card advantage and potentially set up an offensive play for later as well. So then lastly for the grade 2s, we just have 3 copies of Divine Sister Langue de Chat. So she has her continuous skill that says if your soul has a grade 3 or greater card, this unit gets boost and power plus 5,000. So very simple skill. Getting a grade 3 into your soul should not be any problem in this deck. Between Esmerie and your Persona Rides going into your soul, you should be able to get this online as soon as turn 3. And she just gains the extra 5k and the boost. So you can plop her in the front row to be a 15k attacker, you can plop her in the back row to be a 15k booster. She's just a good fill in your board kind of card, which is very helpful in this deck since you definitely want to fill up your entire board, especially on your Persona Ride turns. So that's all the grade 2s. Moving on to the grade 1s. First off, we have 3 copies of Bringer of Soaring Wind, Lacte. So she has her auto ability when she's on a back row rearguard circle. That says at the end of your turn, if you have a Vanguard with Gramgrace in its card name, you can retire this unit to choose a grade 3 unit card from your soul and put it into your hand. So this ability is there to let you loop either your Esmeries or your Persona Ride copies back into your hand at the end of the turn if you don't have another one in your hand to go into for the next turn. So it helps you set up your plays next turn. It is a ±0 since it retires itself in order to give you that 1 card from your soul back into your hand. So essentially a Soul Blast 1 for a ±0. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you can get the Esmerie loop going, you shouldn't have to grab a copy of her from your soul. You should be able to loop 1 from your drop by just using your Energy Blast. So if you have that loop going, this is more there just to get your Persona Ride copies out of your soul so you can get that consistently every turn. If you fail to find a second copy of Esmerie and you only have 1, if you don't have another way to Soul Blast it out, then you can just use this to get it back into your hand and go into it. But most of the time, if you use this card at all, you're going to be using it to grab that Persona Ride copy. But it can be a helpful card in order to boost the consistency of the deck. So next up, we got 3 copies of Magic of Purification, FuRyu. So her auto ability says when this unit boosts, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, you may soul charge 1. So once again, just a simple ability to help you build up that soul. It is during boost, and your Vanguard has to be grade 3 or greater. So the earliest you can use this is the battle phase of turn 3. So do keep that in mind. Again, if you're soul blasting a lot early game for Spiral Cutie or whatever, this is a little bit slower than Gwen Laurel is, but it is a way to help build up that resource if you really need it. So next we got 1 copy of Yellow Jeweled Beast, Topaz. So he has an auto ability that says when this unit is placed on rearguard circle or put on guardian circle, you can put a total of 2 cards from soul or drop that were in the ride deck into the ride deck face up, and perform either of the following according to the circle this unit is on. So if he's on a rearguard circle, you can look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose up to 1 unit card with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard from among them, call it to rearguard circle, and shuffle the deck. And if it is not your main phase, you rest that called unit. And if he's put on guardian circle, then this unit gets shield plus 15,000 until the end of that battle. So this can be a pretty versatile card in this deck. It requires you to send 2 cards from either your soul or your drop that were originally in your ride deck back to your ride deck. So the most you could possibly use this would be twice, but we're only running one copy of it, so being able to pay that cost shouldn't be much of an issue, especially with as much soul blasting as this deck does. You do want to grab those 2 cards from the drop, preferably, as opposed to from the soul, since if you grab them from the drop, it's essentially free. So you can guard with this card, and he can be a 20k shield, so a nice defensive option for the deck. Or you can call him to rear guard, and you can use his skill to do a top 5 call to grab anything you want onto your board. So he can be helpful in building up that board, especially if you're playing against a control deck or something. So if you're trying to set up your big turn and you need to fill in some rearguard circles, he can help in that regard. And you don't have to worry about the resting that unit's stipulation on this effect, since there's no way to superior call this card during the battle phase with this ability. So you're always going to be calling him during the main phase. So whatever you superior call will always be at stand. So just a nice versatile card, giving you potentially some free card advantage or some free extra defense, depending on the situation. So the only other great ones we have are Sentinels. So first off, we have 3 copies of Palladium Zeal Dragon, just your standard perfect guard. And then of course 1 copy of the Nationless Blitz Order Elementaria Sanctitude, the original version. So you can play it without paying the cost if your opponent's Vanguard has triple drive. So that's all the grade 1s. Moving on to the grade 0s, we just have our trigger lineup, which is 7 crit, 4 front, 4 heal, and 1 over. So starting first with the crit triggers, we have 4 copies of Blade Feather Dragon. So he has his auto skill. At the end of the battle, this unit boosted, you can put it into your soul to choose one of your units, and it gets power plus 2,000 until end of turn. So this skill is very rarely used. It can be an emergency soul option, I suppose, but yeah, most of the time you're not going to use this for anything, but it can be there if you need it. Additionally, we have 3 copies of Knight of Orderly Bow, Livarch. So just your vanilla crit. Next for the fronts, we have 4 copies of Bard of Heavenly Song, Alpak. So a continuous skill for your opponent's Vanguard's grade 3 or greater. This unit gets shield plus 5,000. So you're a 20k shield front trigger. Then for the heals, we have 4 copies of Palpitation Angel. So just the vanilla heal. Of course, you can run any of the effect heals if you so choose. And then lastly, our 1 over trigger is Light Dragon Deity of Honors, Amarta Noah. So as additional effect, it says until end of turn, you also perform drive checks for the battles your rear guards attack. So once again, just like with OG Gramgrace, it's pretty much player preference what over trigger you want to run. I am still sticking with Amarta Noah, since we can occasionally have some grade 3 rear guards out with this deck. So you can potentially get a lot of extra drive checks with this. But if you prefer to run one of the nationless ones, you can replace this with Valnauts or Eidos Faro or whoever you prefer. So that is the deck. So we will go ahead and have our 1 fight with it. And let's see, we'll fight Ottawa this time. And we will be going first. And we open with our over trigger. Alright, so we'll discard one of these Esmeries to ride Marin. And we get our energy generator, and we can just end our turn. And I will let that one through. And she gets a crit trigger right off the bat. That's going to put us to 2. Alright, so we'll discard that other Esmeree to ride Blaster Dark. And Marin skill lets us check the top 7 to not find a blaster because we don't have any. So instead we call out Wingull Brave. And then we can use Blaster Dark skill to counter blast and retire. And Blaster Dark will gain a drive, but she doesn't have any rear guards for us to pick off, so we just get the drive out of it. So let's see, we'll go ahead and pop Lancarse over here. And then we'll attack with Blaster Dark first, who does have Twin Drive. And we get a front trigger. So then we'll attack with Lancarse. And she guards. And she's gonna play Blazing Warcry. And she finds Travis. So she put him into her soul. And Latifah lets her soul blast him out. And Superior call the card whose name I can't remember. Gunjoku. Who gains 10k for being Superior called. And let's see, I'll go ahead and guard that one. And I'll let that through. And we get another front trigger. Which unfortunately she could still poke us, and I don't really want to give up any other cards in my hand right now, so I think I'm gonna have to let that one through too. So then Gunjoku retires himself and lets her draw. Alright, so let's see, we'll discard. And we'll drop Lactate, I guess. Right, Gramgrace Sieg. So then first we want to revive Esmeree from our drop with her ability. So we'll Energy Blast 3. And call her to the back row center of the circle. And then we'll go ahead and pop Gwen Law over here. And his skill will let us Soul Charge and give him 5k. My Soul Charge or heal, of course. So then we'll use Gramgrace Sieg's activate ability, the Soul Blast one. To give Esmeree the ability to attack from the back row and an extra 10k. So with that, I think I'm just going to go ahead and attack with Esmeree first. And we're going to use her ability to let us counter blast one. And give Gramgrace an extra 5k and an extra drive. So now Gramgrace's ability will let us suck Esmeree up into the soul. but we won't draw now. We'll draw during the end phase. And that also gives Long the Sha an extra 5k, since we have a grade 3 in our soul now. So we'll attack with Gramgrace Sieg. He does have triple drive. So now we'll have Long the Sha attack. And she guards. And then we'll have Gwen Law attack. And she lets that one through. And now Gramgrace Sieg's ability will let us draw one more time. And Virabel will let her energy charge again. And she's going to use Virabel's skill to pick apart that board. Alright, so I'll guard that one. And she got no triggers, nice. Now Virabel will restand, but she has no copy of it in the soul, so it won't get any drives on the second attack. So I'm gonna let this one through. And we get a crit trigger, which is very nice timing, because that will shut down both her rear guard attacks, since they can only gain 10k. But since that attack hits, Gojo can retire himself and let her countercharge. Alright, so now we can Persona Ride. And again, our first priority is to revive the other copy of Esmerie in our drop. So Energy Blast 3. And call her to back row center. And then we'll use Gramgrace Sieg's activate ability to Soul Blast out the other copy of Esmerie. Set her up back in our drop for next turn. And then we'll Energy Blast once again to give both Esmerie and Gramgrace Sieg an extra critical. So then we'll call Defend over here. And we'll call... Let's see, we'll go ahead and call Spiral Cutie Angel over here, and we can use her ability since we Persona Road this turn. So we counterblast one, and we look at the top two, and we'll add Lactate to our hand, and we'll leave that heal on the top of the deck. So then we'll call Lactate over here. And let's see, I think I'm gonna stop there, actually, because I don't want to lose my entire board next turn when she starts retiring stuff. So we'll go ahead and attack with Esmerie first, which triggers Defend skill to give Esmerie an extra 5k, and then Esmerie's skill once again lets us counterblast to give 5k and a drive to our Vanguard. She let that one through. She got a crit trigger. Alright, so we got her to 5 with that. And then Gramgrace Sieg will put Esmerie into our soul, but we do not draw right now, so that heal remains on the top. So we will go ahead and attack with Gramgrace Sieg, which triggers Defend skill to give him another 5k. Bringing him to 33,000, 2 crit, plus triple drive. And she guards. And we get our heal that we knew was coming, which we do get, so we will go ahead and heal that Esmerie. And let's see, we would need 3 triggers for that to go through, so I'm not going to risk that. I'm going to give that power to Spiral Cutie Angel. Alright, so now we'll attack with Spiral Cutie. And she guards and intercepts. So then we'll attack with Defend, boosted by Lactate. And I could use his ability here, but I'm not going to. Because, yeah, she's going to perfect guard it anyway. So she survived, but she's only got 1 card left in her hand. So now we can use Gramgrace's ability to draw. And since she's probably going to get retired anyway, we'll go ahead and use Lactate's ability to retire her. And we'll grab another Persona Ride copy from our soul. And she did get her Persona Ride. So our second Vanguard swing will have extra drive this turn. And again, she'll begin to pick apart our board with Veerbell Dragon skill. And then she's going to use Blazing War Cry, and she finds Latifa, which she puts into her soul. So yeah, she's only going to get 3 attacks this turn since she couldn't build any more of a board. So let's see. We'll go ahead and guard that with that over trigger. And she got no triggers on that. Nice. So now she restands Veerbell, and he does have 1 drive on this attack since he soul blasted out another copy of him. So let's see. I am going to go ahead and we'll just perfect guard that one. And we'll discard that Esmerie. She gets a heal trigger, and she does get. And Latifa will gain 10k since both the rear guard circles in front of her are empty. So that's only one crit, so we'll just let that one through. And we get a front trigger that is wasted. Alright, so she's only got 4 cards in her hand, so I think I'm going to go ahead and declare final turn. And then we will Persona Ride. Alright, so now we revive Esmery from our drop once again. So we Energy Blast 3. And unfortunately that's all the energy we have, so we won't be able to gain our crits this turn from Gramgrace's skill, but that's okay. We're going to go ahead and use that Activate ability and Soul Blast out Esmery. To give the 10k and the ability to attack to Esmery. So then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we'll call Topaz back here and use his ability to send Marin and Wingal Brave from our drop back to our ride deck. And we look at the top 5 and we find a bunch of triggers. Okay then. Well, you know what? We'll just plop out that Persona Ride copy. And I'm going to call over top of him, but that deck thins a little bit, so it makes us more likely to get a trigger. So we'll call Defend over top of him. And then we'll pop Long Desha in our back row, since she has boost, since there is a grade 3 in her soul. And then we'll call Gwendolyn to the front, who will have guard restrict since we Persona Road this turn. And we are good to go. So we'll attack with Esmery first. And once again, Defend skill gives her an extra 5k. And her own skill lets us Counter Blast for 5k and a drive to our Vanguard. Let that one through. And again, Sieg will shove her into the soul. So we'll attack with Gramgrace Sieg. He gains 5k from Defend. And he has triple drive, of course. Oh, she's got to lay it through. And we get a front trigger on top of that. And that crit does not save her, so we got her with that one. So there you go, that was version 1 of my Gramgrace Sieg deck. I do like this deck quite a bit. Like I said, it is just sort of a bunch of marginal gains from the OG Gramgrace. But it is very fun to play, especially with the combo of Sieg and Esmery, creating a nice loop every turn. So anyway, I will be back soon with more deck profiles. I think next up I'll be doing my Favernil deck. So until then, I guess that's all for this video. So lots of luck to you and yours.